and I upset Sonny Liston, and I just turned 22 years old. I must be the greatest. I told the world, I talk to God every day. If God's with the king of that, he'll just be better. I shook up the world. I shook up the world. I shook up the world.
I said, can I be a legend? Search your soul and answer me this question. Do you think I have what it takes to be great, but still be humble and learn from my mistakes?
Good night, everyone, and welcome back to your favorite live sports show. I am the Justin of #ThisJustin, and as usual, I am welcoming back the family with me. You know my two guests as usual. They're no longer guests. First, introduce Dwayne Marcus from the G.O.A.T Talk with Marcus. How are you doing, my guy?
I'm good. I just gotta say, I was saying this before we started. Steezy is gonna make me go to like a Joseph A. Banker or a Men's Warehouse or something. Every time we come on a show, he's like gotta pull out all the stops and look all dapper and stuff. It's like I'm underdressed for the occasion. Yeah, I need to start getting some more button-ups in the wardrobe for sure.
I think I'm going to start coming on the blazer just shortly. At least when he comes on the show. But that person that we are indeed talking about is none other than Calvin Domingo, but you know him as Steezy A. Smith, who is smiling because his Seahawks finally won a game this weekend. What's going on, Steezy?
Yo, what's going on, Justin? What's going on, Neil, Marcus? Hope you guys are doing wonderful. Yeah, like you said, I'm feeling real good. It's about damn time we got a dub, and I'll be the first of hopefully many, at least until the season ends. So,
you think you can make the playoffs though?
No, I'm not really thinking that we have a real shot. I'm really hoping that we can run the table, show some resiliency down the stretch, and hopefully that'll save some jobs. Hopefully that'll get guys new contracts and whatnot. And hopefully that'll want to entice the rest to stay long term.
Well, there is a team that was looking, or at least threatening, to run the table. And that is none other than the Kansas City Chiefs, who personally I had dead and buried when they were 3-4. Now they've rattled off, I want to say, 5 straight wins, including Sunday night's weird. That's all I can call it. Weird win over the Denver Broncos. So, Dwayne, I know you and I kind of share similar feelings on this. So I'll ask you first. Are the Chiefs, once again, because they do have the best record at the moment, tied 8-4 with 2 other teams in the AFC. Are the Chiefs once again the best team in the AFC?
No, and before I get into why, I just want to say shame on the Denver Broncos for making Daniel Sorensen look like a good safety last night. That was unbelievable. I still stand with my statement for a couple of weeks ago. Daniel Sorensen is absolutely the worst safety in the National Football League right now, but the Denver Broncos made him look like the second coming of Ronnie Lott or something. I don't know. But no, the Chiefs are not back to be the best team in the AFC. I mean, primarily because there are 2 other teams that share their record. There's one team, excuse me, in the New England Patriots that could supersede them and have a better record than them, or they could lose, and the Bills could have a similar record to them. So they're not back to being the best team in the NFC. But records aside, when you look at it, they haven't beaten anybody. Like they've beaten nobody. And in fact, all the games that have mattered, they've lost. They lost to Baltimore in primetime. They lost the game to LA. They'll have a chance to avenge that loss later on in the season. They've lost their game to Buffalo. They lost their game to Tennessee. Like, these are really important games. Who they beat? And they beat in the NFC East, which we all know has been the worst division of football for the past 4 or 5 years. They beat a Green Bay Packers team without Aaron Rodgers. They beat Cleveland on opening weekend. I guess that one counts. But when you look at what Cleveland has been doing, it's just been up and down. It's hard to really give that win any validity. And then they beat down on the Raiders and the Broncos. What else is new? The Chiefs have been doing that for as long as the Chiefs and the Raiders and the Broncos have been in the same division. So there's not much really in the Chiefs' corner as it pertains to them being the best team in the AFC. They don't have their defense is still a big question mark. I can name at least 3 to 4 defenses in the AFC that are better than the Chiefs' defense right now. And surprisingly, Patrick Mahomes still hasn't played a complete game of football from start to finish. Like at least to me, he hasn't. He's yet to play a single game all throughout 13 weeks of the season that we're looking and say, yeah, that's a Patrick Mahomes football game. You could look at the Raiders game, for example, but it's the Raiders. And it was a really good game. And if you want to give him that one, I'll give him that one. But he hasn't had a quality game against a quality opponent all season. And when you look at the schedule, if I'm not mistaken, he doesn't really have another chance to do that until the playoffs start. They don't really have another quality opponent outside of the Chargers, outside of the division that he can put up a quality game against. So, no, the Chiefs aren't back to being the best team in the AFC. The only way I would say that the Chiefs are the best team in the AFC is if they win the AFC Championship. And I don't think they're going to do that. So we won't be having conversations. I won't deem the Chiefs as the best team in the AFC until this time next year, if they're in that conversation come this time next year. But I'm done with the Chiefs being the best team in the AFC.
I know Steezy is usually a positive guy on this program, Mr. Ray of sunlight and optimism. So Steezy, you disagree? Like I feel that you're going to come and tell me, yes, the Chiefs are indeed the best team once again in the AFC.
You know, I do want to say that, and I actually will say that, but I don't really say it with a lot of confidence. And I think they're really only the best team in the AFC by virtue of the AFC just being a mess right now. Like, it's so muddy. There's just no team that you could really trust. The Patriots, I like the Patriots. You know, I definitely trust them a lot more than I did a couple of weeks ago. And I feel like if New England wins tonight, then my answer changes. But until that happens, you know, game time is about an hour away. For now, for the time being, just by default, it's the Kansas City Chiefs. You know, Dwayne hit on all the points. Yes, their offense has still looked pedestrian. It still looked mediocre. Patrick Mahomes still hasn't looked like his usual magical, you know, best quarterback in the game self. But with the defense, what they're doing, I think that's real. You know, you could talk all you want about competition and whatnot, but to see how far this defense has come, even in the beginning of the season, like they were on pace. They were on par with my Seattle Seahawks. Those defenses weren't just awful. These were the worst of the worst, bottom of the barrel. It's for us to see the progress that they've made. They've made, you know, a few changes, even personnel-wise. You know, Melvin Ingram, I know he's not the biggest name. He's not the biggest addition, but ever since he's been brought in via the trade deadline, their pass rush has received a notable boost. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Chris Jones, they started using them inside more. We see the sort of effect that's having. Frank Clark is having a decent 3, 4, 5 game stretch. And there's a reason why he's getting $20+ million a year. He's not the most consistent pass rusher. And I could most definitely attest, you know, he played for my Seattle Seahawks for a couple of seasons. So he's not the terror of a pass rusher that he was paid to be. But I think it's a great sign that he's stepping it up in these last couple of games. Tyrann Mathieu, we all know what he's capable of, top 3, top 5 safety in football. Their corners, I think, are very underrated. People don't talk about their cornerbacks. But their defense has definitely picked up the slack. Their defense is definitely the reason why they've been winning football games, just because the offense, they haven't been doing their part. And I know we're getting at a point in the season where it's like we can't continue to give the Chiefs the benefit of the doubt because they've only really done it once this year. And Dwayne alluded to it in that game against the Raiders. And so I'm not going to lean in that direction, but let's just imagine for a second, what if the offense just somehow magically just picks it back up? And you combine that with the way the defense is playing, they could really go anywhere. I mean, and especially when you look at the mess that's, you know, currently happening in the AFC, how can you trust, besides the Patriots, how can you really trust any of these other teams? You know, we know, at least in Kansas City, we know the talent is there. We know the pedigree is there. We know they've done it before. We know they're still the reigning AFC conference champions. And so I guess I'm going to wait till playoffs come around for me to really crown the Patriots. Or if they even win later tonight, then maybe I could say the Patriots. But for right now, I gotta go with the Chiefs. But like I said, it's really by default, and I say it without as much confidence as, you know, other people would. But yeah, I gotta go with the Chiefs.
So for tonight, I'm going to ease up on my negativity, as I'm always called. So I will point out the positives. Initially for Kansas City, they are committing a lot more to running the football, especially since Clyde Edwards-Helaire has returned. And they're trying their best. They really are trying their best there. I will agree with Steezy. Their defense, barring competition, has improved tremendously. I mean, one of those teams is the New York Giants. Another is the Green Bay Packers without Aaron Rodgers. And Teddy Bridgewater should not be on anyone's primetime games ever again. That being said, in this 5-game winning streak, I think only one team has scored as high as 17 points, and that's the highest they've given up. I think they're only allowing 11.2 points per game. And would you know it, they have, I think, 10 takeaways in this span. So their defense has stepped up. I mean, all competition, including even in that Raiders game. The reason, though, I have to go with Dwayne and say I can't say this is the best team in the AFC as much as currently, and this is before Monday Night Football, they do have a share of the best record at 8-4. Is that offense still is not good? If you take the Raiders outlier out of that 5-game winning streak, would you know that Patrick Mahomes only has 2 touchdowns as opposed to 3 interceptions in that span? There are 2 games where he does not even have a passing touchdown, including Sunday night's game against Denver. This is a team still struggling from drops. This is a team still struggling with ill discipline. Patrick Mahomes' feet in the pocket are doing all sort of things, including the samba or whatever dance steps he decides. He is not a disciplined quarterback, and it is showing. And I will give all credit to the defense. But as both of you alluded to, I have more confidence going forward in New England because New England has less glaring problems, if you can call it that. Like outside of, I know Steezy likes to mention New England's lack of outside perimeter players, lack of playmakers. But get rid of that. New England doesn't turn over the football. They run the football well, and that is an elite defense. These are not exactly things you can say about this Kansas City Chiefs team. So unless New England loses tonight, and even if in my mind that New England loses tonight against Buffalo, I still expect New England then to turn around and win their, the return game against Buffalo in New England. So for right now, for these next 3 weeks, I'm going to say the Patriots are indeed the best team in the AFC. But as y'all both mentioned, the AFC is so bad and so, because I don't trust the Titans without Derrick Henry. After last night, sorry, Marsh, I no longer trust the Baltimore Ravens as good as Lamar Jackson maybe. I have no trust in anyone else in the AFC West. And the Colts have Carson Wentz at quarterback, so I just can't trust that. I'm just going to have to say New England, and Kansas City is probably the second best team in the conference right now, and that's sad to see. But speaking of conference, we have a big Monday night showdown coming up, and I really wanted to preview that or have this episode as, a game to preview, but that's what ESPN is there for. So let's keep one segment to this. Guys, the AFC East is on the line beginning tonight. I'll start with you this time, Steezy. Who needs this win more? The Bills or the Patriots?
I got to go with the Buffalo Bills. And here's why. I think that the shine has definitely come off of the Buffalo Bills, especially in recent weeks. We all saw that horrific loss to the Jacksonville Jaguars. I don't care how much parity there is in the NFL. You have no business losing to the Jacksonville Jaguars a week after they get trounced by my Russell Wilson-led Seahawks, 31-7. And then you allow that team to beat you 9-6. I mean, so I understand. I understand why people are kind of hopping off that Bills bandwagon. And another argument against the Bills is that, they've only played, weak competition. They've only dominated, weaker teams. And, you look at some of their wins, they just don't have that many quality wins. And so I think a win tonight in prime time against a team that many believe to be the best team in the AFC, a team that many believe are real Super Bowl contenders. I think if Buffalo is to win tonight at home, they can kind of snatch, some of that shine that they've lost. They can kind of get that back. And at the same time, they can also snatch that and take it away from the Patriots. I know the Patriots are on the road, and so they're probably not favored. I'm not exactly sure what the betting lines are, what the odds are, but I don't think the Patriots are favored. And so it's not like if they lose, it's not the end of the world. I just feel like with the Buffalo Bills are kind of in a mini slump right now. There's a lot of question marks about them. And they only really beat up on the weak teams. And so I think a win against the Patriots, not only do they finally get a quality win against a top-notch or a top-tier opponent, but they're also kind of they're able to kind of get some of that swagger back, And against the Saints last week or on Thanksgiving, they lost Tre'Davious White to a torn ACL. And so that pass defense, which is one of the most stingier pass defenses in all of football, they're definitely going to feel his absence. And so for them to even, if they're able to pull out a victory, without their best cover guy, I know against the Patriots, that probably won't be too much of a problem, just because, like I've lamented before, the Patriots, I still don't believe in their playmakers on the outside. I know Kendrick Bourne has stepped it up. I know Hunter Henry's a threat, always a threat in the red zone, but I'm still not sold. I need to see more. But with Buffalo, my main arguments for them, they just really have yet to play, a quality opponent that people are going to label as, oh, that's a great victory. And, they get a chance to kind of steal it away from the Patriots, the team that everybody looks at as the favorites right now. And so I think Buffalo needs this win more. And when looking at their schedules, I think Buffalo also has a tougher schedule to close out the season. And so they need this victory a lot more than the Patriots do.
Dwayne, do I even have to ask you this question, knowing your feelings on Buffalo before this game? I'll ask anyway. Who needs this win more? Patriots or the Bills? Patriots or the Bills?
The Bills, and it's not even close. Since the NFL realigned its divisions to its current format in 2002, the Buffalo Bills have one division title. Last season, we got one. The Jets have one, the Dolphins have one, the Bills have one, the Patriots have the rest. This was the Bills' division to lose coming into the season, right? And then Cam Newton got released, and then Belichick spent a whole bunch of money, and we were like, wait a second. And they started 2-4, like, all right, maybe the Bills still got it, because it looked nice that the Bills had beat up on Miami and beat up on Washington and beat up on Houston and beat up on the Jets and all these teams after they had, lost to Pittsburgh opening night. And it was like, oh, well, maybe it's not. And then you see the Patriots rattle off some wins. They, after losing to, I think it was after they lost in overtime to the Cowboys, which is a complete meltdown. They've rattled off 6 straight wins, and they're the hottest team in the NFL. Meanwhile, the Buffalo Bills lost a game to Tennessee, and they lost a game to Indianapolis, and they've struggled immensely in a lot of their games recently. It's hard to say. I don't think that there's any team. I don't think there's any team in the NFL right now that is under more pressure than the Buffalo Bills. I truly believe that the Bills and the Cowboys are in the same bucket. Now, we all know how I feel about the Cowboys, and if you don't remember, the last time I was on this show, I spent about 7 minutes talking about just how bad the Cowboys are, right?
Exactly.
But when you look at the Cowboys and the Bills, they're in the same boat, right? Like, they beat up on the teams they should beat up on, and then they struggle against the team that they should beat. Now, here's what I'm saying, right? It is very hard to go undefeated in any sport, right? And I don't want you guys to think that I expect every team to win every game, because it's impossible to do. Well, it's not impossible, but it's damn near impossible for you to win every single game. Here's what I'm saying. Yeah, it's nice that you beat up on Miami, you beat up on Washington, you beat up on Houston, you beat up on the Jets and New Orleans. That's what you're supposed to do. But you can't look helpless against Tennessee. You can't look helpless against Indianapolis. You can't look helpless against Pittsburgh. You can't look helpless, to Steezy's point, to the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are a dumpster franchise in the NFL right now. So, should the Bills have won those games? Those are tough opponents. So it's not that it's not a loss that it's surprising. It's the way they lost. When you look at the teams that are in the AFC playoff picture right now, you've got the Ravens, who we all know can run the football. You've got the Patriots, who they've got Damian Harris, and they've got those 2 backups that I can't think of right now that are really good at running the football. You've got the Tennessee Titans, who are expected to get Derrick Henry back should they hold on to the AFC South division and even make it to the playoffs. He'll be there. You've got the Chiefs, who, as Justin mentioned earlier, are starting to lean more on Clyde Edwards-Helaire. You've got the Chargers, and they've got Austin Eckler and Joshua Kelly and those boys. Joe Mixon's in Cincinnati. If Pittsburgh sneaks in, you got to deal with that with Najee Harris. You've got Jonathan Taylor, who's been stealing headlines all over the place for the last couple of weeks. You've got Josh Jacobs. Like every team in the AFC that is in position to potentially make a run for the playoffs has a really good run game. And there's not a chance, I think, in hell that the Buffalo Bills can win a playoff game this season. I don't see that happening, because every single opponent that they could possibly face has a really good running attack. We don't have to worry about the Browns, because the Browns are done because of Baker Mayfield, but even they could sneak in it because they're 6-6. Like, it is impossible for the Bills to make it. And so the only way that the Bills can make another deep playoff run this season is if they get the first round bye. The only way they can get the first round bye is if they win the division. In order to win the division, they have to beat the New England Patriots. No one had any expectations for the Patriots this season. They were 7-9 last season, coming off a COVID year and all this other stuff. No one had any expectations for the New England Patriots. We thought that they would get it together. We didn't think they'd look this good this soon with this guy. So the Patriots are good, win, lose, or draw. Excuse me. They can leave. They can leave Orchard Park the same way they came in, just fine, sitting in a very good position. The Bills, I hate to sound like Nick Wright, because he says a lot of crazy things, but like, Mac Jones is young, right? And we all know that Bill Belichick doesn't have a lot of years left in him, but we can all assume that Josh McDaniels is going to be the next head coach of the New England Patriots whenever Bill Belichick decides to hang it up as a coach. It could very well be another 20 years before we see the Buffalo Bills win another division crown. Because the Patriots are just better than the Bills on offense. They're better on defense. Like, they're better on the sidelines. They're better in special teams. They're just a better football team. And Steezy's right. The Patriots are the underdogs heading into this game because it's in Buffalo, and Buffalo has an insane home field advantage, and they've got a high-powered offense. But the Bills are just not on the Patriots level. They haven't been for the last 20 years. They got one good year because Tom Brady left. And now Bill Belichick is just reminding them who he is, and they're going to lose this game tonight, most likely.
Well, we'll go on the reverse order and actually make the show interesting by saying, no, I'm kidding. No, I really don't mean it. It's got to be Buffalo, right? And first, it was like Tony Tucker said when he came on the show, it's one thing to win, but there's another to win when there's the pressure of expectations. And to Dwayne's point, it's all nice and good, and to Steezy as well, beating teams you're supposed to beat. And obviously, you're not going to win every single game, especially primetime matchups. But you can't be losing to the likes of the Jacksonville Jaguars as a team with Super Bowl aspirations. But here's the reason why I feel that Buffalo needs this win more than New England. The very first one is that you're at home. And if you lose this game, I am not sure that you are going into New England, where Buffalo traditionally does not have very much success, and then win a game in the late season against a Bill Belichick who is now coaching in his mind for yet another Super Bowl and the first without Tom Brady. And to that point, I like to throw around numbers. Bill Belichick, since he's taken over head coaching role in New England, has a 35-7 record against Buffalo. 35-7. Sean McDermott, since becoming the head coach of Buffalo, never beat Bill Belichick before last season. Like, forget home or away, he never won a game against New England before Tom left and went to Tampa Bay. And then to cap it out, the reason why I really truly believe Buffalo needs this more than New England, to what Steezy mentioned, the schedule. After this, Buffalo has to travel to the champs. They're going to Tampa Bay. And for whatever weaknesses Tampa Bay may have, the Bucs have not lost a game at home all year. Then on top of that, you are going to New England. And let me check. Yeah, you have those two games. Obviously, I don't think they have any other tough games on the schedule. But going to New England and going to Tampa Bay, those are very, very two hard road games that are going to happen. Then when you look at New England's schedule, obviously they return home to play Buffalo. And in that mix, I think they have the Jaguars, the Colts, and the Dolphins. Not exactly a murder's row of a schedule there when you get past the Bills, huh? If indeed you are targeting the AFC's top seed, and especially the division title, it has to start with a win here, because I suspect you're not sweeping New England in these two games. Even if you win here, you're likely going to lose in New England. And these two games will definitely decide the AFC East, especially when you have a tough road game to follow in Tampa Bay. Speaking of tough divisions, we know traditionally the AFC North has given us some epic battles over the year, and none greater than yesterday. I think the Steelers won the last second 20-19 over the Ravens. I think they sit now at 6-5-1 and a game behind the last wild card spot in the AFC. So Dwayne, I'll start with you this time. Did that win just save the Steelers' season?
No, it didn't. And it's, they'll probably make the playoffs, but this is going to go down as one of the worst defensive seasons in the history of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And for those guys that didn't watch my show on Wednesday when I had Justin on the show, that's really, really bad news for a football team that's known for defense. When you think about the Pittsburgh Steelers, you're thinking about the Steel Curtain, the original Steel Curtain. anchored by Mean Joe Green and that defensive front four in the 70s that provided 4 Super Bowl championships. Then you think about Blitzburgh in the 90s. They didn't win any Super Bowl championships, but still a really good defense. Then you've got the defense in the mid-2000s that won you. Like, this is a football team that lives and dies by the saying defense wins championships, because all their championships were won by their defense. This defense has sucked. It has been the worst defense probably in the history of the Pittsburgh Steelers organization. This is going to go down as one of the worst seasons under Mike Tomlin's administration as the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So, it doesn't matter if the Pittsburgh Steelers sneak their way into the playoffs. It doesn't matter if for the 15th consecutive season, Mike Tomlin goes without a losing season, which is something that no one in the history of the game can say they've gone this long without having a losing season. That's a lot of credit goes to Mike Tomlin for that. But like, when you look at what's happening, when you look at what Ryan Clark is saying, when you look at what all these former Steelers players are saying, and the fact that they have a better pulse and a better idea of what it takes to be a Pittsburgh Steeler than the guys that are on the roster presently right now as we speak, that's an issue. So, and if we want to be technical, like, it was a great play by T.J. Watt because he got into the backfield untouched. But despite that, Lamar Jackson was literally just a couple centimeters off from hitting Mark Andrews, and we'd be looking at a situation where the Ravens would have won that football game if it weren't for that ball being off by just a touch. So, like, it's great that you got the win because division games breed upsets, as we always know, and it keeps you in the playoff hunt. But this has still been one of the worst defensive seasons ever. We're looking at a schedule with Minnesota, who we'll get into at the end of the show. And boy, I've got a lot to say about Minnesota. Tennessee, Kansas City, Cleveland, and Baltimore. Like, that's not an easy schedule. Like, I mean, it's not a tough schedule, but you've got to go to Baltimore. That's not an easy place to play. Like, it's not a Lambeau Field or a Gillette Field or anything like that. But Baltimore's still a tough place to play. You have a home game against Cleveland. I'll give you that. You have to go to Kansas City. We all know Kansas City is one of the 5 hardest places to play in the National Football League. So it's nice that you get a divisional win, but like, that doesn't erase the fact that the Cincinnati Bengals handed you your butt on a silver platter last week. It doesn't erase the fact that in the last 17 games entering on Sunday, you were 6-10-1. Like, it doesn't erase the fact that you got blown out by the Cleveland Browns in the playoffs last season. It doesn't erase the fact that, most importantly, that Big Ben, he's not even on his last leg. He's on his last toe. Like, he is god-awful. And why Mike Tomlin and the guys in the front office allowed him to come back, I don't know, because that wasn't a good business decision. And now what you've done as the Pittsburgh Steelers is, forget saving the season. You haven't saved anything. You've actually set yourself back at least 2 to 3 years, because you look at the draft class coming up this season, there's not a lot of good quarterbacks. You look at what's happening next season, the Pittsburgh Steelers might suck, but they're not going to suck enough to be in that top 5, maybe top 10 range to get you a decent quarterback. So you look at the roster, who you got: Mason Rudolph, Joshua Dobbs, Dwayne Haskins. One of those guys are going to be calling the shots under center next season. This isn't about saving the season. The Pittsburgh Steelers embarrassed Mike Tomlin this season from start to finish. The Pittsburgh Steelers tied a football game with the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions, who continue to find new ways to lose a football game. It was beautiful to see just how innovative they could be. No, they didn't save anything. They just put a Band-Aid over a bullet wound. And next week against Minnesota, the wound's just going to blow up and they're going to suck again. They didn't save anything.
Then on my guy Steezy for the optimism, because you're not going to get any from me and Dwayne. Steezy did that win save Pittsburgh's season.
Man, I mean, yeah, like you said, I'm usually the glass half empty. Is that the right way? The glass half empty.
No, you're usually glass half
full. You're the glass half full guy.
You're the glass half full guy.
That's what I meant to say. But this time around, I mean, it's real hard for me to defend the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Whoops.
I know it's a...
No, go ahead, because it's not going to be good for the Pittsburgh Steelers in this segment. Go ahead.
Yeah, look, it's hard for me to defend the Steelers. You know, even after coming off a victory, it's hard to trust them. You know, week 1, that win against the Bills, yes, you know, give them all the credit in the world, but if not for a special teams blunder, they probably would have started the season off 0-1. Dwayne already hit on all the points. Like, there's not really much for me to add. Big Ben, there's already reports of him not coming back next year. Well, like, why is that even a report? Why is that breaking news? Like, that was the case before the season even started. Like, we saw that episode last year in the second half of the season. His play completely fell apart. I mean, in the playoffs, like he just completely disintegrated. And it's been a lot of the same, this year. We've seen some flashes, of him being able to push the ball down the field, but we haven't seen enough. And Najee Harris, I love Najee Harris. In all of my fantasy leagues, I probably have him in like 10 of them, in 10 of my leagues. And so, I was a big believer in Najee Harris, but I'm not as big of a believer in real life. His yards per carry is still hovering or flirting around 4, if not under 4. That's not good. And I'm not saying he's not good, but that's a product of the offensive line. Offensive line still isn't very good. And the receivers outside of Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, he's been struggling. I mean, that could be a byproduct of Big Ben just not being able to sling it all over the field like he used to. But Chase Claypool hasn't been the guy that we saw last year. The defense, Dwayne, you alluded to yet again. The defense hasn't been the same. I know they were missing Cameron Hayward, T.J. Watt. He's arguably the best defensive player in football right now after Aaron Donald. But he can't do it alone. Minka Fitzpatrick, he hasn't been his usual excellent self. The play on the secondary has been somewhat abysmal. And surprisingly so. They're usually stingy when it comes to defending opposing passing attacks, but it seems like teams are just able to pass the ball all over this defense. And so they don't have their defense going for them. Big Ben, they don't have a quarterback going for them. The running game it's not playing at an optimal level just yet. There's just holes everywhere, and it's hard to trust them. They got trounced by the Bengals just last week. Like, did we forget about that? And so there's not a lot to really be confident, right now about the Steelers. They still have, head coach Mike Tomlin. He could very well will this team to at least a record at or above 500. I don't doubt that. But as far as making any sort of playoff run, as far as, them saving their season, there's just no way that was never going to happen. Not with Big Ben returning to play quarterback for this football team, and not with an offensive line that still looks like it's one of the worst in football. I mean, Najee Harris was a great pick, and he's definitely shown so many flashes. I love his potential, especially as a pass catcher. I think he's really turned a lot of heads as far as, his abilities as a pass catcher. And that could be a byproduct of Big Ben just having to dump it off all the time. But, Najee Harris has all the potential in the world. I don't believe in this football team. I don't believe in their quarterback. I don't believe in their defense. I don't believe in the receivers outside Deontay. I sure as hell don't believe in the offensive line. And I just believe in the teams in their own division more than them. So, yes, while they're coming off a division victory, a much-needed one against the Ravens, look, the Ravens could have easily kicked the PAT and set this game into overtime. Now I understand they didn't because they're out of corners, and so they probably know that, there's no way we'd be able to defend them if they had the ball first. But still, I mean, they kind of gave the game up. And so I don't know if it's really Pittsburgh winning or Baltimore giving it away at the end, but that didn't save their season. Where's their season going?
It is a sad day when I am the person who has to bring optimism to a segment. Like, Marshall must be behind the scenes, like, wondering what the hell is going on.
Justin, if you defend the Pittsburgh Steelers, I'm leaving the show. I'm not finishing the show.
Let me say I will defend John Harbaugh's decision. Let me defend that first. Not only were they down corners, but you're on the road in Pittsburgh. As bad as the Steelers are, this is still a very tough place to play. Heinz Field is not, you don't walk into Heinz Field and win games. On top of that, like, I hate depending on a coin toss in overtime, especially given the rules that if I score a touchdown first, game over. So I support the decision because I try not to knock play calls more so than actual execution. And T.J. Watt made a great read. I mean, granted, I see Lamar Jackson with the football. I'm going at Lamar Jackson. I don't care wherever the football may be. As you correctly said, Reid, a couple centimeters to the left, and we're talking an entirely different situation. I defend the play call there because a couple centimeters here, we're not talking about the Steelers in the manner I may talk about them now. So to add the optimism, I will say they stopped the season from being over for 1 week. Because had they lost that game, it's all over. That's the end of that. So that's how I would put it. They may not have saved their season, but they stopped the demise a week early. They didn't save the season, as y'all both said. I'm not even going to try to find numbers. Y'all know my thing is to find stats and numbers to support what I'm about to say. There's nothing to support. This Pittsburgh team is bad. Both of y'all correctly said, there is no way they should have come back after last season, and I would hope the brain trust was not tricked by that 11-0 start. Because in my preseason previews, I did not have the Steelers team to make the playoffs. They should never have come back with only Ben Roethlisberger as the only quarterback of note on their roster. Like, Dwayne Haskins is terrible. I keep forgetting the other quarterback. He's just even worse. Don't tell me his name. There's no need. There's no need to bring up his name. He's even worse. And when you had a quarterback rich class like this one, and for Pittsburgh to make absolutely no attempts to move up to find Ben's replacement, that is malpractice. That is sabotage. But the real point why they have not saved their season, although they're only a game behind the Cincinnati Bengals for that 7th and final wildcard spot. Dwayne alluded to it. When you look at that schedule, Dwayne was being kind. That schedule is murderer's row. It is so bad I can't even remember it, so I'm going to look down at my computer. 3 of their last 5 games are on the road. They have to go into Baltimore. They have to play the Chiefs in Arrowhead. They have to play the Cleveland Browns, the Tennessee Titans, and the Minnesota Vikings. That is hell. Because there is a likelihood, if you take out the Browns, because they don't have them making the playoffs, that all the rest of those teams are playoff contenders. I do not see Pittsburgh winning 2 of these last 5 games. So, well, as I said, that win stopped, I think it only delayed the inevitable. And I want to shout out to Donato Bucci from JT and the Don Hughes Steelers fan. But sorry, Don, as great as that win was, or it must have felt for you as the Steel Curtain. No, I'm sorry. I just don't see Pittsburgh with that schedule. Maybe they beat their Henry-less Titans. Maybe they get Baker Mayfield on another bad day, which is customary for him against the Browns.
Watch it.
Yeah, I don't have Cleveland segments here. But they're not sweeping the Ravens. They're not beating the Chiefs in Arrowhead. And these Vikings are desperate. They're not beating Vikings in Minnesota.
And just before we move on, the other thing too worth mentioning is, yeah, they're behind in the AFC. When you look at who's ahead of them, it's the Cincinnati Bengals, who've beaten them twice this season. So you really got to pull some rabbits out of the hat here, because you can't tie with you can't. Well, I mean, it's impossible to have the same record because they've got a tie, but you can't match wins with the Bengals and expect to make the playoffs, because they're the reason why you have 2 losses. So they're really like 2.5 games out. It's not looking good for the Steelers.
It really is not. Who is looking good for, oddly enough, the Washington football team, who have rattled off 3 straight wins, capped by a last-second win over the Las Vegas Raiders, to move into not even 7th, but the 6th seed, second wildcard spot in the NFC. I know White Dwayne is smiling, so I'll let him go first. Now that Washington have put themselves in the mix of the playoff hunt, is Taylor Heinicke the long-term answer at quarterback for the Washington football team?
And before we do this, I know Neil usually does solo shots. I would just request that for this particular moment, let's get all these beautiful faces. Let's keep them on the screen while I do this, because these reactions are going to be worth it. First of all, answer the question. No, Taylor Heinicke's not the long-term answer for Washington. I don't think that Taylor Heinicke can. Taylor Heinicke's not the answer to Washington. He's better than Ryan Fitzpatrick, which I didn't foresee. I thought that they would win more games with Ryan Fitzpatrick. He's been doing very, very well. You have to look at what the Washington football team had to deal with, right? They've lost Chase Young, and much love to Chase Young. He hasn't really been as explosive in his sophomore season as we expected, based on what we saw in his rookie season. But this defense as a whole really kind of took a step back. This was one of the best red zone defenses in the league in the back half of the season. That kind of went away. This is one of the stingiest Steezy loves the word stingy. This is one of the stingiest back sevens in the league in the back half of the season. And hasn't been the case this season. And yet, somehow, it's December 6th, and the Washington football team are 6-6, having rattled off 4 straight, and they're second in the NFC East, and they have a legitimate shot to win the NFC
Don't
East
say it. Don't say it.
from the Dallas Cowboys. Now, Justin doesn't like when I say that, and this isn't Cowboys. These are facts, right? I tell people all the time, I don't hate the Dallas Cowboys. It's just facts. And again, you guys don't want me to talk about the last 25 years. I won't. Let's talk about this season. Let's talk about the fact that they went into Arrowhead. The defense stiffened up after the first 3 drives. CeeDee Lamb goes out with a concussion, and for some reason, Mike McCarthy's like, oh, we don't need to run the ball. You lose that game. You go back home for Thanksgiving. You know who the refs are. Jerry Jones told us they had a meeting on Saturday about that game on Thursday. This was one of the strictest officiating crews in the NFL. What'd they do? 14 penalties, over 100 yards. They lost that game too to run the football. They bounced back with a beautiful win over the Saints. Who cares? This isn't the Saints with Drew Brees. It's not even the Saints with Jameis Winston. It's the Saints with Taysom Hill. No Alvin Kamara. No Michael Thomas. Who cares about a win over the Saints? The Dallas Cowboys have a date with the Washington football team next week. Then they've got a game against like the Eagles or something. And then they've got another game against the Washington football team. And then they've got a game against like the Cardinals. And then they close it out at the Giants. The NFC East is up for grabs. And I keep saying this because it's so important. At the beginning of the season, before the season started, I said that the Washington football team would go 10-7 and they'd win the division. And people thought it was crazy. I also said that the Dallas Cowboys would go 10-7 and their season would come down to week 17 against the Arizona Cardinals. How's that looking, Justin? Because by my calculations, the Cowboys started the season 6-1. Now they're 8-4. Meanwhile, Washington started the season 2-4. They're 6-6. Oh, and by the way, the Philadelphia Eagles are 6-7. Like this all Dak is back and Zeke and the Thunder and Lightning with Zeke and Pollard, and you got Amari and Coop and Lamb, and it's beautiful. I love it. This is an explosive offense, one of the best offenses in the league. This defense has gotten better. I saw a thing on Instagram after they beat the Saints, like, this is the best defense in the NFL. I don't know whoever posted that for the Game Day NFL. They're smoking crazy crack, and I want some because that's absurd that you would even put the word best defense and Cowboys in the same sentence because no. But the Dallas Cowboys are 8-4, and the Washington football team is 6-6. And this we were talking about Taylor Heinicke. I know, but I just couldn't help but talk about the fact that the Washington football team could actually win the NFC East. It's worth noting. It's worth noting.
As sure as the sun shines, Dwayne found a way to bring a Dallas Cowboys run. I was waiting for that. Yeah, like, if nothing, he is consistent. But we will stick with the question, hopefully, Steezy. Is Taylor Heinicke the long-term answer at quarterback for the Washington football team?
So I want to preface my comments before I dive into my comments by saying that right now, I don't think I've seen enough to label Taylor Heinicke as a franchise quarterback. Just because, look, he's 28 years old. This is his first full season starting.
Wait, he's what?
He's 28.
Yeah, he's 28. And so I just don't know if he could really attribute that title, no matter how well he plays. Just because, when you talk about a franchise quarterback, it's not just intangibles. It's not just talent. It's not just leadership abilities and actual production on a football field, getting wins. It's not just that. It also has to play. Age also plays a part. And so, just, being 28 years old, I don't know if I could label him a franchise quarterback. But as far as being the long-term quarterback, however long-term might be as it pertains to the Washington football team, I mean, when was the last time they had a franchise quarterback, or at least even a long-term option at quarterback? And so that being said, I think Taylor Heinicke can be, a long-term option, whether that's 2 years. Because, just the fact that they haven't really had a quarterback, I think having a quarterback for at least 2 years or maybe even longer than that qualifies as being a long-term option at quarterback for the Washington football team. And here's some food for thought. In 12 games through week 13, Taylor Heinicke has less interceptions than Pat Mahomes. 11 to Pat Mahomes is 12. In the same amount of games through week 13, Taylor Heinicke has more touchdown passes than Lamar Jackson, 18 to 16. And he also has less INTs than Lamar Jackson, and that number is 11 to Lamar's 13. And through 13 games, or through week 13 through 12 games, more passing yards than Ryan Tannehill, over 2,800 to Ryan Tannehill's 2,774. And the reason why I brought those guys up, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Ryan Tannehill, obviously Lamar and Patrick Mahomes they're easily franchise caliber, superstar, MVP caliber quarterbacks, right? Definitely on that. But we look for the Tennessee Titans. And so for Taylor Heinicke to even be in the same conversation as some of these guys, statistically, 4-game winning streak, Dwayne pointed it out, that Washington football team, I think across the board, they've kind of disappointed. You know, we expected them to have a defense that vied for positioning as far as being the best defense in the NFL. And that's been far from the case. You know, their secondary has been awful. The pass rush, why does it look like the pass rush has gotten better ever since Chase Young was Montez hasn't been playing? And so we're still able to these wins. And they're against quality competition. You know, the Raiders, they've been in the playoffs all along. Obviously, my Seahawks, that was a victory, you know, in prime time. The Carolina Panthers, you know, they were able to defeat Cam, you know, in his homecoming, excuse me. What was another team that had a victory against? The Buccaneers. Even without AB and Gronk, they were able to handle the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And so for them to be able to pull off wins that they have no business, I mean, I think that's a great thing. And Taylor Heinicke, he's, I think, very underrated as far as what he can do outside of the pocket. You know, I think he's sneakily mobile. I think him as a leader, the way he's able to rally his troops, I definitely see some positives there. He's not the most talented quarterback. You know, he's not going to make every throw in the book, but I think he is at least average or above average as far as his inability to turn the football over, which is a good thing. And, you know, I've seen a lot of positive signs. You know, hopefully they make a playoff run, just because I feel like to really determine whether or not a quarterback can be a franchise quarterback or at least have the talent of being a franchise quarterback, that's proven in the playoffs. And so right now he's doing more than just his job. He's keeping his team more than just afloat. And who would have ever thought that the NFC least would have a chance to send multiple teams to the playoffs? I mean, the fact that that's even a possibility through week 13. Okay, well, yeah, Dwayne, sorry, you did. Yeah, I gotta give you a little bit of credit. You did say that, my brother. So besides you, though, because I know the majority of people out there, I mean, nobody saw that coming. And so they haven't really played many division games at all either. And so let's say, you know, they end up beating Dallas at least once, they beat Philadelphia and whatnot. I mean, man, we could be talking about the Washington football team being one of the more surprising teams of the season. And so for them to even be at this point, I think that's a positive thing, and it definitely has to give the front office some thought as to whether or not, you know, they can make Taylor Heinicke a viable long-term option. They're not going to have a top draft pick anyway, and this college class isn't going to be full of, you know, of top-tier talent at that position. And so, you know, maybe just by default, you're kind of stuck with Taylor Heinicke as a long-term option. But even if that's the case, I wouldn't be mad or upset about that. I think he's playing well.
So y'all thought I brought y'all on the show because I like y'all and y'all are basically family. But I brought y'all to answer this question because I have no idea. I have no idea. I will say this. I have to believe in scouts because there must be a reason you went undrafted. Granted, people develop at different times in their life and not just in football. And I know people will throw Kurt Warner and Tony Romo at me, saying these guys were also undrafted, et cetera, et cetera. I just find it telling, for a lack of a better word, that the Washington football team decided to bring in Ryan Fitzpatrick, and I won't go in on another Ryan Fitzpatrick rant, but I found it telling that they thought they needed to bring in Ryan Fitzpatrick. And then Ryan Fitzpatrick won the job in the offseason, even after Taylor Heinicke had that impressive playoff performance against the eventual champs, no less. So do I think he is a long-term answer for Washington? My heart and brain tells me no. And oddly enough, I got to see Taylor Heinicke up close and personal this season. I went to the Packers game against Washington football team, albeit at Lambeau. And you say sneaky athletic, Steezy, you'd be surprised to know he rushed for 2 yards short of 100 against us. So I don't even think it's sneaky athletic. I think he's actually very mobile. He was able to make some throws. He had a very deep bomb to Terry McLaurin. I think he has the ability or the arm strength to make most throws, and especially that one. This winning streak, and I mean in this winning streak, he has 5 touchdowns and only the 1 pick. The winning streak, what I've seen so far, the playoff performance would lean towards me saying, or should lean towards me saying, this guy could be the long-term answer at quarterback. But I didn't even know he's 28. Good gosh, he's 28. And not only are you 28, there must be a reason you went undrafted. And as I've come to say on this show quite often, you all know, I don't know anything about football. And there are people who are paid to know about football. They didn't draft him. Man, he can't be the long-term answer at quarterback, especially at 28 already. So while direction and putting themselves squarely in the NFC playoff race, there's another team going in the complete opposite, and that would be my division rivals, the Minnesota Vikings, who had an unbelievable, shocking, unacceptable, whatever adjective / adverb you would want to use for that loss in Detroit. Dwayne, as a guy who who has a team in the NFC North, did that loss just doom the Vikings' playoff chances?
First, I want to say the Minnesota Vikings cost me almost $1,000 on Sunday because they couldn't beat the Detroit Lions. I just want to put that out there. That's number one. Number two, and most importantly, Kirk Cousins should be arrested. Kirk Cousins needs to be arrested because Kirk Cousins has been committing some of the highest levels of embezzlement I've ever seen in my life. Why the Minnesota Vikings are paying Kirk Cousins what they are paying him to put up performances that, like the one that we saw this past Sunday, is asinine. We all know the clinical definition of insanity. It's doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Why did we think that just because Kirk Cousins walked into the tunnel after halftime and yelled at the cameraman, "You like that," that he was going to deliver a Super Bowl to the Super Bowl-less Minnesota Vikings? Why did we think that because Kirk Cousins wears number 8 and he's got the bulky flak jacket and he can do the cool dances sometimes like he's a dad, that he was going to be able to deliver a Super Bowl to the Minnesota Vikings? Why did we think that after he look, listen, the Washington football team hasn't been, they don't have the smartest people in their front office, right? But the one thing they've done very well was they didn't pay Kirk Cousins. The Minnesota Vikings paid Kirk Cousins after the Washington football team franchise tagged him twice in a row. Is that not telling to you that at the time one of the worst teams in football decided they didn't want to pay him? You thought it'd be a good idea to drop a bag on this man? You've got Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson, easily 2, in my opinion, top 10, top 12 receivers in the NFL. They look like Corvettes just sitting in a beat down garage. You've got Dalvin Cook, who deals with injury, but he's the same thing. Kirk Cousins is not leading this football team to a playoff win. He can barely lead them to a victory when the moon is up. And the Minnesota Vikings thought it would be a good idea to pay this man. Did the loss doom the Vikings' playoff hopes? Yeah. It also doomed the hopes of Kirk Cousins getting more money. It basically printed out the pink slip from Mike Zimmer. It is confirmed that when he gets the opportunity, Justin Jefferson is going to leave Minnesota, and so will Dalvin Cook, and so will Adam Thielen. Kirk Cousins is not, has not, will never be that guy. Oh, it's nice. He's got an iconic moment, and I'm sure when he retires, they will play that clip all the time. You like that. It's nice. White man got angry. Ooh, but he ain't that dude. We talking about a division with Aaron Rodgers here. We're talking about a division. Kirk Cousins might actually be the worst quarterback in his division. I mean, geez, we all know he's not better than Aaron Rodgers, right? But when you look at the trajectory of Justin Fields, I think once Matt Nagy leaves there, the trajectory of Justin Fields, I think without Matt Nagy is going to be better than what we've seen from Kirk Cousins these past couple of seasons. And Jared Goff's no better. But based on what I saw this past Sunday, I'd like my chances to win a football game with Jared Goff than I would with Minnesota. I bet you dollars to donuts if Jared Goff was on the Minnesota Vikings, the Vikings wouldn't have lost that football game. I bet you dollars to donuts if Justin Fields was on the Minnesota Vikings, the Vikings wouldn't have lost that football game. The Minnesota Vikings wouldn't have lost that football game. So I don't even have to entertain you by saying that. The point is, the Minnesota Vikings have been able to sneak into the playoffs the last couple of seasons because of, number one, the NFC East has been really, really bad. They hadn't been putting in multiple teams, right? We saw them put multiple teams in the playoffs. I think the season that the Cowboys won 13 games, and then the season that the Eagles won the Super Bowl, they hadn't done that since, so that opened up a spot, right? They've benefited from the fact that there's some other teams that have kind of just been really wishy-washy. They've benefited from the fact indirectly that the NFC West is, as we all know, one of the toughest divisions in football. And so because of that, those four teams tend to cancel each other out, but they'll still give you two teams. The Minnesota Vikings, after beating our Green Bay Packers, Justin, were in prime position to make the playoffs. And we would have both been wrong because neither one of us had them in the playoffs to start the season, if I remember correctly. And then they do this. They lose an important game in San Francisco, and then they follow it up by losing to the 0-10-1 Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions finally won a Super Bowl on Sunday. That's how beautiful that win was for the Detroit Lions. Yeah, the Vikings playoff hoops are doomed this season. They're doomed for next season. Any other season, as long as Kirk Cousins, number 8, is calling the shots. I don't know why they hired. I don't know why they signed him. I don't know why they're paying him what they're paying him. Mike Zimmer needs to go. Kirk Cousins needs to go. Thielen, Jefferson, and Cook, they need to go for their own health because I think that Justin Jefferson is going to be one of the greatest receivers we've ever seen play the game. I think he's just that good. But this is inexcusable. I don't even have to get into the fact that they've got a relatively tough, like they've got the Rams, and they've got another game against the Packers. They've got 2 games against Chicago and a game against Pittsburgh. Like, that's not a terrible schedule, but that's not a good one either. When you think about the fact that they've got Washington, Philadelphia, and San Francisco coming vying for that playoff spot as well, and they've already lost to San Francisco, it ain't looking good. So yeah, you can throw a stick of dynamite on that because the Vikings playoff hopes went up in smoke.
So yeah, we start with the negativity as usual. We're going to come this joke in the first way. We are going to bring Steezy, hopefully with a measure of optimism. Did that loss just doom Minnesota's playoff hopes, or do they still have a shot at winning either the 6th or 7th seed?
You know, when you look at the bottom of the NFC playoff picture, just like the entire playoff picture in the AFC, it's real muddy. It's messy. It's like to really go to the dance. You know, they're kind of unsure. They want to go, but, you know, they don't really know if they want to go. But I don't know. It's real muddy. And so that fact alone, that's what gives them a chance. But, oh, my goodness, that was absolutely horrific. I mean, you don't lose to the Detroit Lions, make a playoff push when jobs are on the line. Mike Zimmer's job is on the line. Kirk Cousins, a future contract extension, is on the line. Adam Thielen as well. I mean, I know he got injured. He left the game with a high ankle sprain, and so I didn't mean to bring up his name, but there's jobs on the line. There's playoff hopes on the line, and you lose to the worst team of football. You give a winless football team their first victory of the season. I know you didn't have Dalvin Cook, but Alexander Mattison has filled in admirably. I mean, he still had, you know, a great day in fantasy. I can attest, but he almost had 100 yards rushing. He had a touchdown, and so he was doing his Dougie. And, you know, I agreed with everything that Dwayne said, but the one thing that I thought was somewhat egregious was the Kirk Cousins and the Jared Goff take. I understand where you're going, my brother, and so I'm not gonna I'm not gonna try to get on you for that, but I thought that was definitely out of pocket. I mean, in Jared Goff, we've seen him at his very best, but we've also seen him at his very worst. We've all seen Kirk Cousins. I'd take Jared Goff's best over Kirk Cousins' best any day.
You wouldn't. You're a liar. You would not.
I absolutely would. I absolutely would. Call me crazy. That's fine. But, like, they're in the same bucket, guys. There's not really a big gap between these two. I'd take Jared Goff's best over. We saw Jared Goff's best. It got the Rams to the Super Bowl, right? But what is Kirk Cousins' best got his football team? Where is it got?
But Jared Goff at his best also happened to coincide with the Rams having literally the perfect setup for him. And Kirk Cousins, he's never really had that, you know, that setup. It's never been nearly as great. But I just feel like when you look at Kirk Cousins now, I mean, once upon a time, he was in MVP conversation, or at least he was kind of on the outskirts. He was on the outside looking in. If you look at his stats right now, I mean, a 25-3 touchdown to INT ratio, I think that's magnificent. And to be quite honest, I don't think he's the sole reason a lot of the Vikings lost. I mean, defensively, especially on that last possession, I don't know what the hell the Vikings were doing. And so, I mean, Kirk Cousins can only do so much in that particular moment. I'm not going to annihilate him. It was a turnover-free game on his end. He threw for 300-plus yards, 2 touchdowns, and that was without his second-best receiver in Adam Thielen, and without his best running back in Dalvin Cook. And so I'm not going to flame him. But you are right, though. I mean, it's not like the gap is this big between Goff and Kirk Cousins. So I guess my argument becomes moot. But, yeah, I mean, they've been doomed. They're just way too inconsistent, and especially when it comes to these one-score type of ball games, one possession type of ball games, it's a lot more, especially lately. They've just been on the wrong end of these. I mean, you just can't lose these type of games. I mean, they played the Lions close early in the year. We all talk about week 1, how they should have beat the Bengals, but Dalvin Cook's fumble in overtime kind of doomed them. Against the Cardinals, they should have won if their kicker would have made a 30, pretty much a PAT. Look, they've been in so many tight games. The Niners, they lost. They needed that one. The Packers, I guess they won, but, I mean, that could have gone either way. The Chargers, they won that. They lost to the Ravens. They lost to the Cowboys without Dak Prescott. That was awful. Yeah, I just don't really have much reason to believe in this football team. I do believe in Kirk Cousins more than Dwayne, and I guess that's really the biggest part about what I'm saying. But I don't think the Vikings end up making it. I mean, a loss like this, you just can't have this. And it happened. And it's been happening all year long. And so, yeah, they're definitely doomed. And that helps us because, I mean, I know the Seahawks have a less than 5% chance of making the playoffs. And I know the Vikings also have the head-to-head tiebreaker. So any loss that occurs or that happens to them, I'll gladly take, just because although I don't see the Seahawks making a run to actually make the playoffs, I can't see us running the table. And so we'll at least play our part, play our roles to ensure that if there's even a minuscule chance of making the playoffs, we'll get there as long as we play our part. And the Vikings losing games, that helps us. So go Hawks.
Let's also talk about the fact that the Vikings have lost 6 of their 10 one-score games this season. They just suck.
Oh,
abysmal.
Jeez. They're the new Chargers.
Yeah.
So here comes, brace yourself, a shocker. I saw this loss coming because I knew the Lions were not going to end this season winless. And I knew that one of their wins, I didn't exactly see this particular win coming, but I knew the Lions win would come within the division. So this does not shock me. I knew it would be either us, Chicago, or Minnesota. And I don't think this loss dooms their season. Hear me out now. The Minnesota Vikings are still just a game behind both Washington and San Francisco for the 6th and 7th seed. They have 2 games remaining against the Bears. Not 1, 2 games remaining against the Bears. And a very winnable home game against the aforementioned Pittsburgh Steelers. Granted, they also have games against the Los Angeles Rams and against us, the Green Bay Packers. But to their credit, they have beaten us this season, and they did beat us at home last season. Again, I don't expect them to win that game this season, though. It'll be the upcoming game against us because there's going to be no Dalvin Cook. And no one knows exactly when Dalvin Cook is coming back. At the same time, though, Minnesota still did rush for 100 yards against Detroit, as you mentioned, Steezy. On top of that, they have arguably the best wide receiver tandem in all of football with Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen. And as much as Dwayne may hate Kirk Cousins, I will say it, and I can't believe I'm about to say this, I am a Kirk Cousins apologist. Because if you look at his numbers this season, Kirk Cousins is 25 touchdowns and just 3 interceptions on the entire season. And he definitely is not the reason that Minnesota lost against Detroit. This team, in my estimation, is still good enough offensively, is too good offensively to be churning out these results, even without Dalvin Cook once Adam Thielen doesn't have to miss any sort of significant time going forward. I still think if you have 2 games against the Bears, a home game against the Steelers, that you have to be within a shout, especially when you're behind both San Francisco And Washington, I don't think this loss, and I could be wrong, and I'm not saying y'all guys are wrong, because I could very well be wrong, and I would lean more towards me being wrong than y'all being wrong. I don't think this loss necessarily dooms their playoff chances. I think it dooms Mike Zimmer's job going forward. Barring a Super Bowl run for Minnesota, and I don't see that happening either, I don't see how Mike Zimmer keeps his job. I love Mike as a very, very good defensive-minded coordinator. I just don't think that a head coach job is one for him. I think the job is too big, especially as it comes to two things: clock management and making offensive decisions to win games. He's just too defensive of a mind to put those in his hands when it comes to play calling or make decisions. Like, Mike Zimmer is the type of coach who tries his best not to lose games more so than he tries to win them. And you see that in his decisions to leave things up to kickers. And to Mike Zimmer's credit, I don't think there is a head has lost more unlucky games because of kickers than him. But when you're a defensive-minded head coach, and as Steezy mentioned, you call that last play in the red zone, I don't know what defense that was. I don't know what the players were doing. I don't know how they are playing so soft, the corners on that route to St. Brown. I don't know why you're playing so soft. I am hoping it is a lack of execution more so than play calling. But Mike Zimmer is, and to get into Mike Zimmer's point, and this may seem counterintuitive what I'm about to say, I am a guy who hates chasing points when it is not necessary. In that, I mean, I hate to go for two unless it is absolutely necessary. And I'll show you the point. I mean, in that game, Minnesota went for two on three separate occasions and came up short all three times. Why that is so crucial to this game: had they settled for a point afterwards each and every time it converted those, Detroit on that touchdown drive, if they score, they need a point after attempt to send that game into overtime, other than them scoring a touchdown and winning it outright. I don't like using metrics to tell me when to go for two unless it is absolutely necessary. I hate it. I don't trust Mike Zimmer as a guy to manage the clock, nor do I trust Mike Zimmer in terms of winning games when the ball is in his hands. I just really don't. I don't think a head coaching role is for him. I just think he is better off suited as a defensive coordinator. So, guys, before we hop on out, I have a little surprise segment I didn't let y'all know. I will not be put on the spot. This is all me. We don't have any graphics for it, but look for it next week when we sort that out. And this segment is called Proving that Barbados is indeed, yes, little old Barbados is indeed at the center of the sports world. And every week, I will give you a little known fact to show you that Barbados is indeed the center of the sports world. And if you want to dump me, I'll show you tonight with this segment. Last week, the talk of the town in the NBA was my Phoenix Suns' big 18-game winning streak. And, you know, we all know the facets behind that. When you look at first, well, let me get to the point. I think the biggest driving force has been none other than James Jones. And I don't think he gets enough credit for what the Phoenix Suns have done. Granted, he was not the guy who drafted our best player in Devin Booker. But what he did do, he has drafted DeAndre Ayton. He signed Chris Paul and Jay Crowder in the same offseason. He also traded for Mikal Bridges. And what may be his biggest move, he was the guy who hired Monty Williams as head coach. What you don't know, as much as James Jones has been on our show, James Jones is married to a Barbadian. And you will say, oh, Justin, you're going for a reach here. Yeah, and it is a reach. But ask yourself this. During that 18-game winning streak, the night that they tied the franchise the previous longest streak of 17, who did they play? The Golden State Warriors. On what night did they beat the Golden State Warriors to extend that franchise winning streak to 17? November 30th. November 30th is also Independence Day in Barbados. And that same very night that the Phoenix Suns defeated the Golden State Warriors, not only did Barbados celebrate its 55th year of independence, they were also celebrating becoming a republic by tying their very last or cutting their very last tie to England. So that is part one of me proving that Barbados is indeed at the center of the sporting world, guys. So you can feel proud to be a part of that very first segment. So I won't keep y'all guys any longer because I too want to go and watch this big Monday Night Football game, and we still have some stuff to do afterwards. So first, Steezy, plug yourself. What do you have coming up? And tell the lovely folks how to find you and what you do.
As always, it's always a pleasure to do this show, especially when it's, with the both of you guys. Still looking forward to working with Marshall one day. Hopefully we can make that happen. And to everybody that's tuning in, to everybody that did tune in, to everybody that will tune in, be sure to come back. Check us out next Monday, 4 o'clock p.m. Pacific time, 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern time. And then as far as the other times, I can't really get into that, but I can at least give you guys that much. But yeah, we talk the latest and the hottest topics in the world of the NFL every single Monday on This Just In on YouTube. So if you aren't already subscribed, if you're already following on Instagram, Twitter, and all the other social medias, it's almost Christmas, it's almost New Year. So please, hit that button, show some love, show some support. As for me, or as for Dwayne, G.O.A.T Talk podcast with Marcus, all socials. You know the deal. You know what it is. Last but not least, you can find me at Steezy A Smith, primarily on YouTube, SteezyASmith. As you guys already know, drop a whole lot of content on the Seahawks, about the Seahawks, but more than just that, a lot of NBA. Actually, I don't even need to go too into it. I just want y'all to, look me up and see for yourself. But with that being said, hope you guys have a great night. Hope you guys have a great time watching Monday Night Football, and I can't wait till next week.
Do we really think we're going to have to leave this part of the show to Steezy? Because I think he plugged my show better than I can ever, and he knows my socials better than me. That's for sure.
No, you're not wrong. He does my socials better than me, too.
I was about to say, but do they still all the same? What do you have coming up next? Let the lovely people know.
Well, as I've told Justin and Steezy, the future of the show is a little bit up in the air right now. I'm not going to lie. I got to work some kinks out. Me and Steezy are in the kitchen working on some stuff. Won't give out too much details about that. But in the meantime, you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter and TikTok eventually on GTP at GTP Marcus. Also, I'm on Twitch now. I'm not streaming on Twitch, but just as a heads up, I'm on Twitch now. Go talk with Marcus as well. It's always a pleasure to come on the show. Like I said, I'm so serious. I'm going to Joseph A. Bank the next chance I get because I'm not going to keep being outdressed by Steezy every time. I just feel so unprepared, so underdressed. But I love Steezy. I love Justin. I love coming here. Obviously, love working with Neil. It's always a pleasure. And yeah. And if you guys think I'm crazy, I am. I am. This is not an act. I'm a lunatic. But you'll grow to love me and you'll go to enjoy it. Only thing I want for Christmas is 100 subscribers on YouTube. I'm trying to make that happen. So please go to YouTube, subscribe to the channel so we can get to 100 subscribers before the end of the year. Yeah. Steezy did it. I think the only thing I can do that Steezy can't do is I can list all the time zones. It's 4 o'clock Pacific, 5 o'clock Mountain, 6 o'clock Central, 7 o'clock Eastern. That's the only thing I can do that Steezy can't do. But that's not that important. Yeah.
Thank you.
These guys have plugged the show well enough, so I have to really thank them not only for coming on, but for every piece of support they give me, not just on the show, but off. Like, we do have a friendship. We do talk constantly. We message each other. So I really want to thank y'all guys. What Steezy did get wrong, though, is that we are on a break, so we will not be here next week, Monday. But we will, after that, sorry about that, Steezy, only informing everyone. No, we will take a week break, but we will be back every Monday, as you know, from there on. I think Dwayne even knows it better than I do. But, 6 o'clock Central, 7 o'clock Eastern, 8 o'clock in the Caribbean, every Monday here on YouTube. And after every show, I will indeed prove to you that Barbados is at the center of the sporting world. But y'all guys don't want to hear this. So for Steezy A. Smith and Dwayne Marcus of Go Talk with Marcus, I am the Justin of #ThisJustin signing out. Please go get and watch Monday Night Football. It is going to be a doozy. I plan to too. And we are signing out. Good night, everyone.
I don't have a mark on my face, and my upset son in Lisbon, and I just turned 22 years old. I must be the greatest. I told the world, I talk to God every day. If God's with the kingdom out of here, Jefferson. I shook up the world. I shook up the world. I shook up the world. I shook up the world.
I said, can I be a legend? Search your soul and answer me this question. Do you think I have what it takes to be great, but still be humble and learn from my mistakes? Shit.